Hello, students. Welcome. Now, whenever we talk about democracy, the first thing that comes to our mind is usually voting, isn't it? But have you ever wondered what happens after the voting is over? How is the power managed? We need to make sure that one person or one group doesn't get all the power. So today, we are going to dive into this very topic, the different ways in which power is shared to make a democracy function properly. So let's begin by asking a very fundamental question. What does this term power sharing really mean in a democracy? Is it just one single method? Well, the answer is no. It sounds simple, but you'll see it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. It's actually more like a toolkit, you could say, with different arrangements for different situations. Okay, so this is our roadmap for today's lesson. We'll start with the basic idea, and then we will look at the four main forms of power sharing across different organs, across different levels, among different social groups, and through competition. And at the end, we will understand why power sharing is so important. All right, let's begin. The most basic principle of democracy is that all political power comes from the people. We, the citizens, are the source of power. But the question is, how do we, the people, actually use this power every day? Well, that's exactly where the idea of power sharing comes in. It is the system that makes sure power is distributed and not just concentrated in the hands of a few people at the top. So this is a very important point to remember, students. Power sharing is not just one single idea. It is a set of different arrangements, and different countries can have different forms of power sharing, depending on their own needs. Today, we will look at some of the most common ones. Okay, let's move to our first form of power sharing. This is called the horizontal distribution of power. Now, what does horizontal mean? It means things are at the same level. So just imagine the government's power is divided among different organs that are placed at the same level. To understand this, let's take a simple example from our school. Think of the different people who have responsibilities. You have your teachers who make the rules for the classroom, right? Let's call them the legislature. Then you have the school principal, who makes sure that everyone follows the rules. That's the executive. And finally, if there is a problem or a dispute, you have a disciplinary committee maybe that solves it. That is the judiciary. See? All of them have their own important jobs. Now, let's look at this table. It clearly explains the functions. The legislature, its main job is to make laws for the country. The executive's job is to implement those laws, to put them into action. And the judiciary, its role is to interpret the laws and to resolve any disputes. So, why is this division of power so important? Well, this system ensures that no single organ of the government can have unlimited power. Because the power is divided, it prevents any one part, say the executive or the legislature, from becoming too powerful. This beautiful arrangement is called a system of checks and balances. Please make a note of this term. It is very important for your exams. Each organ checks the other, creating a balance of power. It's a fundamental feature of most democracies. All right, so that was horizontal distribution. Now let us look at the second form. This is called vertical distribution of power. So if horizontal was at the same level, vertical, as you know, involves different levels, like a ladder, from top to bottom. Now, in big countries like our own India, it's just not possible for one single government in the center to manage everything. The country is too large and diverse, so power is divided vertically. At the very top, we have the central or the union government for the entire country. Then for each province or state, we have the state governments. And even below that, we have local governments, like the municipality in cities or the panchayats in villages. This vertical division of power, where you have governments at different levels, has a special name. It is known as federalism. And federalism is very essential for managing the diversity in a large country like India. It allows each level to take care of its own specific issues. Okay, so we've seen horizontal and vertical sharing. Let's move to the third form. Here, power is shared among different social groups. These can be religious groups or linguistic groups. The idea is to make sure that the country's diversity is reflected in its government. Now, this brings us to a very common doubt that many students have. What about the system of reserved constituencies? You must have heard of it. Is this a form of power sharing? Let's find out. The answer is yes, absolutely. It is a form of power sharing. Why? Because this system gives space in the government and in the legislature to diverse social groups. It ensures that socially weaker sections and minority communities get proper representation. This is very important because it prevents them from feeling alienated or left out from the government. And now for our final form of power sharing. This one is about competition. Competition between political parties, pressure groups, and movements. They all compete for influence, and through this competition, power gets shared.
Have a look at this cartoon. It's quite interesting, isn't it? It shows a car with two steering wheels. This is a brilliant way to show what a coalition government is. Here, two different, often rival parties have to work together to run the government. They literally have to share the power to drive the car of the nation forward.
So another direct question for you, which can come in your exams. Is a coalition government an example of power sharing? What do you think?
And the answer is a very clear yes. A coalition government is a direct example of power sharing. When no single party gets a majority in the election, two or more parties come together, they form an alliance, and they form the government. And when they do this, they share power. For example, they share the different ministerial positions among themselves. Okay, so we have discussed all four forms of power sharing. Now, let us quickly recap everything and understand why these arrangements are so very crucial for democracy.
This summary table is an excellent tool for your revision, so let's go over it one more time. First, we have horizontal sharing among organs like the legislature, executive, and judiciary. Second, we have vertical sharing among levels like the central, state, and local governments. Third, sharing among social groups, like with reserved constituencies. And fourth, sharing among political parties, for example, in a coalition government.
Please remember this line, students. Power sharing is the very spirit of democracy. What does this mean? It means that a true democracy is not about one ruler. It's about sharing power with the citizens who are affected by its decisions. This is the soul of democracy.
So, the most important takeaway from our lesson today is this. For a democracy to be healthy and stable, it needs a combination of these different forms of power sharing. It's not about choosing just one. A good democracy uses a mix of all of them to function well. All right, to end our lesson, here is a little thought experiment for you. I want you to think about this. If you had the chance to design a new country, which one of these forms of power sharing would you choose to include first? Which one do you think is the most important, the foundation for all the others? Think about it.